He was born in 1933 in Sarajevo, and he is a medical doctor and an anthropologist, actually forensic anthropologist by training. And as such, he participated in 1964 in the first exhumations at the Jasenovac site. And as a result of this, and due to his willingness to speak openly about what he saw there, he was forced to flee former Yugoslavia in 1965. And he spent his career teaching around the world at different universities. Currently, he lives in London, UK, and he's a member, he's actually a fellow of Royal Anthropological Institute. And he will give us a lecture tonight about the system of Jasenovac concentration camps. And thank you very much for coming to hear about this.
Reverend Fathers, Rabbi, ladies and gentlemen, sisters and brethren, and dear friends. A large number of people, surviving victims, witnesses, scientists, politicians, churchmen, and people of goodwill, spoke and wrote so much about Roman Catholic and Croatian genocide of Serbs, Jews, and Roma during the Second World War, that it is difficult to say something new. According to the International Commission for the Truth on Jasenovac system of Croatian concentration camps for extermination of Serbs, Jews, and Roma, more than 700,000 Serbs, 23,000 Jews, and 80,000 Roma have been exterminated. Out of that number, more than 110,000 small children were killed. So it is now very difficult to give a better description of the atrocities of Croats and their Roman Catholic priests and nuns, or to give a better explanation of the crimes against humanity and genocide that they performed. The entire Serb, Jewish, and Roma population in the independent state of Croatia had suffered genocide and extermination. The Roman Catholic priests and nuns, and particularly their Franciscan order, influenced and prepared Croats to hate and exterminate all those who were not Roman Catholic. And here today I speak as a forensic scientist who examined mass graves in Jasenovac and Donja Gradina in 1964. I must give you the explanation. There is Sava river on the left bank, it is Croatia, and Jasenovac on the right bank is Donja Gradina, and it is on the Bosnian side at the moment. I'm a medical practitioner, but I'm also an ordinary man, one of those who was exposed to Croat, Muslim, and German atrocities in the Second World War. And for more than half a century, since the early days of my professional career, and particularly after excavation of mass graves at Jasenovac and Donja Gradina in 1964, I tried to tell the world the truth about the unbelievable slaughter of innocent victims of Croatian and Muslim genocide. The loss of more than 700,000 Serbs, 23,000 Jews, and 80,000 Roma, cold-blooded killing of 110 children, young people, old and infirm, ordinary people, just because they belonged, by Roman Catholic and Croatian opinion, to the wrong religion, the wrong ethnic group, or the wrong religion. Yeah. Communist authorities who collaborated with Croatian Ustaša movement tried to silence me and to prevent the truth about Roman Catholic and Croatian atrocities from reaching the people of Yugoslavia in the name of the so-called policy of brotherhood and unity, and also in the name of peaceful coexistence of victims and their torturers and murderers. The report of forensic anthropologists who excavated mass graves at Jasenovac and Donja Gradina was submitted to authorities in 1964, but it was kept in secrecy for more than half a century. Only a part of it has been published in 1992. Even now, after the so-called democratic changes in Balkan states, after the destruction and dismemberment of Yugoslavia, nothing has changed. There are many more mass graves of innocent people killed during the criminal aggression of United States and NATO forces, including, unfortunately, Canada, that people worry very much about those graves than the mass graves of Jasenovac and Donja Gradina. It seems to me that the population of former Yugoslavia is in a state of shock after surviving all the new atrocities that occurred since United States, NATO and European Union interfered in the civil war in Yugoslavia. Roman Catholic and Croatian criminals who planned, organized and executed crimes against humanity and genocide against Serbs, Jews and Roma in the Jasenovac system of Croatian concentration camps for torture and extermination, as well as their present-day followers, try to minimize the number of executed victims, thinking in their criminal minds that it is less of a crime to kill 70,000 than 700,000 innocent people. But the crime is the same if you kill just one unborn child taken from the mother's womb. The International Commission for the Truth on Jasenovac concluded in 2008 that the number of executed innocent victims killed in Jasenovac was more than 700,000 Serbs, 23,000 Jews, and 80,000 Roma. Statistically, the smallest number of people killed in Jasenovac in percentage are the Serbs, but they were more numerous. They managed to execute all the Jews and all the Roma. In 2010, the Commission reported that there were 110,000 children aged under 14 among these poor victims. The mass graves are still there. Skeletal remains of the victims are just 120 centimeters under the surface of the soil. Those who wish can always count the bones if they think that we made a mistake. But one cannot count all those victims that have been thrown into the river Sava and drowned, or those buried in Parchili crematorium, where they were thrown alive to burn to death, or those cooked for making soap, and so on. It seems to me that there are many people today, and there were many such people in the past, who are afraid to learn the truth, because the truth would expose their selfish and criminal intentions and deeds, their lies, their mistakes, their hatred, and their fears. Some of them support on the surface, I'm talking about the present-day politicians, some of them support on the surface investigations of the crimes, but deep inside they are against it. They do whatever they can to prevent new investigations in Donja Gradina and Jasenovac.
and many obstacles are placed to such investigation. Some parts of former Yugoslavia and Serbia is one of those who do not wish to be seen that they are supporting new investigation because they try to keep good relations with the present government of Croatia. At the same time, Croatia is continuing its genocidal policy, which is not different to the genocide occurred during the Second World War. This Croatian policy led to the recent exodus of 1 million of Serbs during the last civil war. They had to escape from Croatia to save their lives, leaving all their property and all their possessions. The president of Croatia at that time proclaimed openly that he is grateful to God because his wife is neither Serb or Jew. Present-day Croatia does not want to allow these 1 million of Serbs to return to their ancestral homes in Croatia. This is the result of deliberate effort to hide the truth about the genocide that Croats performed in Jasenovac camps. And many books have been published on these Jasenovac camps. I know of nearly 3,000 titles, but nearly all of them were taken out of libraries and destroyed. Suffering of victims could never be described in these books and published. It is only possible to imagine the physical and mental torture that they have suffered before and at the time of their execution and final passing away. Roman Catholic Croats and Muslim murderers made the victims to suffer as much as possible because they actually enjoyed to torture them. And they used various methods to kill the victims. Forensic investigation in Donja Gradina and Jasenovac established more than 40 ways in which they used to kill the victims. I will mention just a few of these methods. The most common one was the killing by starvation or by total deprivation of food and water. Unbearable suffering of the victims was described by survivors who witnessed mass death of tens of thousands of prisoners, many of them children. Some of them managed to stay alive for days and weeks, but eventually died. Then there was death of infection and infestation. Survivors described how prisoners died, suffering from various diseases after starvation and lack of any sanitary facilities, drugs, or treatment. As the Croats say, they died of natural death. A special, very severe method of killing of some of the victims was by nailing them alive, using long masonry nails to trees, leaving them to die slowly, sometimes for days. During our investigation, we found a number of trees with nails still hammered in. Stabbing by sharp pointed object, usually a knife. Many survivors described how murderers used to stab victims, usually in the chest or any other part of the body, and that was a method of torture, and after that they killed them. They used knives to extract eyeballs from eye sockets of the victims. And there were many cases of pregnant women who have been stabbed in the womb, or their womb was opened, the fetus was removed and stabbed. In some cases, breasts of the women were cut and hands pushed inside the wounds. There was a huge furnace, or Parchili furnace, or crematorium in Jasenovac, where they used to throw victims alive to burn to death. We could only find some remains of cremated bones, and it will never be possible to estimate the number of victims who were killed in this way. Then, killing by hard labor and torture. Many survivors described how prisoners were forced to work hard without food or water, and those who fell exhausted were buried on the spot, still alive. Survivors also described thousands of victims being thrown into the river Sava, still alive and drowned. Sometimes they used to slaughter them before they threw their bodies into the river. It was impossible to discover traces of various methods of killing on examining remains of skeletons, because the traces were not on the bones, and we had to rely on witness reports, photographs made by murderers, and their statements in the court of justice at the end of the war. Croatia was the only country in the world that has established a special concentration camp to exterminate children. Children were tortured in various ways. The most severe murderers were Roman Catholic nuns in charge of the children camp. Nuns used to kill those children who have cried during the night or by day, or who could not control their bowels overnight. They would take them by legs and smash their little heads on the wall, killing them in that way. One of the methods was hanging, and a very small number of victims were executed by hanging. There is a number of photographs taken by the murderers showing this happening. Killing by firearms. Croatian murderers try to save ammunition and seldom use shooting to kill the victims. We managed, during our investigation, to find some mass graves where victims were shot and buried. Slaughter, the most common way of killing by Croatian murderers. They have used ordinary knives or specially devised knife called Srbosek, or the knife for killing Serbs, which was crescent-shaped and tied to the wrist of the killer to enable him to cut the throat of the victim without much movement of his hand. Very often this method was not efficient. Murderers who were used to kill animals in this way were not skilled enough in using this method to kill human beings. It was quite easy to kill children because their neck was not very resistant, but it was more difficult to slaughter an adult. In many instances, the murderer would cut the skin, subcutaneous tissue, and open trachea without much damage to the major arteries. There would be a huge bleeding from the superficial veins, but the victim would not die instantly. And often, the victim, still alive, would be thrown into the mass grave. He would not be able to survive. Head injuries and skull fracture caused by hitting victims on the head by a bar or a mallet, because Croatian murderers used to beat victims using any kind of wooden or metal bar. If the impact on the head was strong enough, it would break the skull and cause instant death. But very often the bar would slit aside, causing injuries to the soft tissues only, without causing the skull to fracture. The victim could be unconscious and fell into the pit, but after a period of time he would wake up and find himself under a pile of dead bodies, unable to move. There were cases when the victims were not pushed very deep inside the pit, and later on they managed to pull themselves out and escape. But the most common weapon used by Croatian murderers was a mallet. Only occasionally they would use a hammer. Examining skulls found in mass graves, we found out that in majority of cases the injury was either on the left or on the right side of the skull, in the temporal or parieto-temporal region, or in the parieto-occipital or occipital area. We have seen fractures in the frontal region only occasionally. We know from the testimonies of survived victims that Croats would take victims 2 by 2, tied together. At the edge of the pit, one murderer would hit one victim with a mallet on one side of the head, and the other murderer would hit the other victim in the same way on the other side of the head. And in most cases, there were complete fractures of the skull involving lamina externa, spongy layer, and lamina interna, and fractured bones would penetrate deep into the brain tissue and probably caused an instant death. There were cases when the skull was not deep fractured. In such cases, the lamina externa with some spongy tissue was fractured, but not the internal layer. In some cases, we found just small cracks on the skull bones. That was due to a lesser impact of the mallet because the murderer was either tired or the mallet was not heavy enough. Also, some skulls are more resistant to an impact. In some cases, the victim could move his head and the mallet would slide aside. In such cases, death was not instant. It could cause internal bleeding, which could be very slow, and the victim could wake up with severe pain in the head and covered by a pile of dead bodies. He would die after some time in most inhuman way. In a large number of skulls we found remains of brains reduced in size by desiccation, and in most cases signs of traumatic bleeding could be detected. Remains of brains were sent to the Department of Forensic Medicine of the Faculty of Medicine, University of Ljubljana, but I have never seen their report. Croats used to separate adult males from women and children. Children had to suffer tortures together with their mothers, being left without food, water, or even some space to lie down. They were left naked in the open field, exposed to cold, rain, and snow. A large number of children died in such terrible conditions, but some of them had been killed at the will of Croatian torturers. Roman Catholic nuns used to poison some children. A number of children were separated from their mothers and sent to the concentration camp specially formed for small children. The International Commission for the Truth on Jasenovac found that 2 out of 3 Roman Catholic priests, most of them of the Franciscan order, were personally killers, torturers, or leaders of groups of other murderers. According to the American sources, more than 1,400 Roman Catholic priests were the actual killers. Roman Catholic bishops, archbishops, and even Pope Pius not only knew about the atrocities performed by their clergy, but supported the murderers, used to promote them and give them rewards. The policy of the Vatican State and the Roman Catholic Church was to destroy and exterminate non-Catholic Serbs, Jews, and Roma. No Roman Catholic priest has ever been punished for killing or raping small children, for taking unborn children from the wombs of their mothers, for seducing and raping of young girls, young women, assaulting women who have been deprived of their clothes and then left naked to be observed by ogling priests and male Croat torturers. The bestiality of Roman Catholic nuns towards small children is very difficult to understand. They used to smack children's heads against walls, to tear up their limbs, to strangle them with their own hands, to help in slaughtering them, to poison them, to deprive them of food, water, and so on. All these that I have said just now may seem to you and to some other people that it is a result of my sick mind, or as a result of my criminal tendency to accuse the Roman Catholic Church or Croats for such unbelievable atrocities. That's the reason why I'm going to present to you a number of testimonies of victims whom somehow managed to survive. Then we had some testimonies of Roman Catholic priests who personally committed tortures and murders and recorded them in their diaries or testified in the courts of justice after the Second World War. It would take many hours or even days and weeks, maybe even months, to quote all that the International Commission for the Truth on Jasenovac managed to collect. But I'm going to quote only a small number of these testimonies. For instance, in his book, Serbian Youth of Perušić County, Victims of Genocide, 1941 to 45, Dan Lastavica quotes a letter of an Italian officer in which he said the following: "What have these poor Serbs done to them? Is it human to pull out unborn children from the wombs of their mothers and then to hang them on a wall with inscription, Serbian flesh, $1 per kilo? They killed the fathers of those children. They took Serbian mothers with their children from their homes, so that immediately after that, Croats, including their own children, started to loot property of their neighbors. These Croats used to snatch small children from their mothers, take them by legs and smash their heads against trees and stones, and they would throw them into a pit." Dušan Bursac, in his book Angels in the Hell, wrote that according to his investigation of the 365 villages at the foot of the mountain Kozara, Croats killed 23,858 children from day 1 to 14 of age. According to the data of the Federal Department of Statistics, 73,360 children have been killed in this area. The same author described in his book, Croatian Genocide of Serbs, 1941 to 45, on page 26, how Roman Catholic nuns poisoned small children. Another victim of Croatian torture and slaughter of her family, who managed to survive, Mrs. Zorka Delić-Skiba, gave a vivid description of her suffering when Croats killed all her family. She was held by hair by a Roman Catholic nun who tried to expose her neck to the Croatian killer who tried to cut her throat. But she looked him directly into his eyes and he could not complete the slaughtering. I must say that she was around 5 years old. So the murderer simply pushed her alive into the mass grave, and she wrote about this crime in her book, Saved by My Kind Eyes. At the 4th International Conference on Truth about Jasenovac, Mrs. Zorka Delskiba came and showed to the audience the scar on her neck. Egon Berger, in his testimony for the future generations to remember, wrote the following. In summer of 1942, every day men, women and children were transported to Gradina to meet their end. 45,000 Roma lost their lives at that time. In 1942, several 100,000 of innocent people were killed at Gradina. Serbian, Jewish and Roma children were brought from 1,107 places to be killed in Jasenovac. In his book, The Uprooted Family Tree of Danons, Tzadik Danon, who himself was a witness of torture and slaughtering of women and children, wrote, "The children were snatched from their mothers in the most rough manner. Crying of children and mothers were enormous. The children were taken to the edge of a mass grave. The murderer would take one child by one, smash his head with a hammer and push the body into the pit. All that he, Mr. Danon, and other inmates witnessed that looking from the distance of just 30 meters." The book, The Largest Present-Day Crimes by Dr. Dragoslav Stijakovic, on more than 500 pages, he gives description of Croatian and Muslim atrocities, giving names of the torturers, killers, rapists, and also the names and places where victims have been buried. The most striking are descriptions of slaughtering of pregnant women from whose wombs the unborn children were taken and slaughtered, or the description of rapes of very small girls, schoolgirls, and young women. All these crimes were committed by ordinary Croatian and Muslim men. Radomir Bulatovic, writing about concentration camp Jasenovac, gives a vivid description how small children aged 6 months to 6 years were cut in half at Vranogorsk on the 30th of August 1941. He also witnessed in 1941 when 700 Jewish children from Osijek were taken and sent to Auschwitz. Slaughtering of children occurred in Sisak on the 3rd of August 1942, and it lasted until the 8th of January 1943. In his book, The Independent State of Croatia, Vasa Kazimirovic quotes a number of comments and reports of German officers. For instance, Captain Hefner von Glass, Honstow, wrote on the 14th of June 1941 the following: "In a beastly way, they killed even the unborn children. Many children and women had a plain stone as their bed. Naked skeletons. The commanding officer is a savage beast. They raped women, torturing them and killing at the end. They killed children." Another German, in his book Yugoslavian and das Dritte Reich, wrote that Croats murdered 11,194 children under the age of 14 at the Kozara region. At Šušnjar, near Sanski Most, Croats put 20 children in a hut and burned them alive on the 14th of September 1941. On the 4th of August 1941, Croats raped girls, forcing their mothers to watch. Writing about Croatian atrocities, Dusan Babic explained that in the 5th camp in Jasenovac for extermination of small children, children were separated into 4 groups. In the first group were newborn children up to the age of 1. In the second group were children aged 1 to 4. In the third, there were children aged more than 4 years. And in the fourth group, there were sick and disabled children. It is estimated that more than 75,000 children lost their lives just in these camps. A very important book, Jadovno Complex of Croatian Concentration Camps, 1941, which was recently published by Croatian author Đuro Zatezalo. He wrote the following: the Croat Ustaša state, all its agencies, from the Ustaša organization, political and military and police organs, to the state administration, judicial and other organs, were engaged in organized genocide. Serbs and Jews were brought with the aid of state military police and party organs to be destroyed. Investigation and destruction of people in concentration camps started even before this system was legalized, so to say, on the 25th November 1941. And Croatia had concentration camps for Jews, Roma and Serbs before Holocaust started in Germany. Many people do not know that. Men, women and children were captured at their homes, in the fields, at the working places, in churches, at funerals, at schools, on trips, and though all they were tortured, but after torture killed. In this most atrocious way, just because they belong to another faith or another nationality. Leaders of the Communist Party said these crimes disturbed the feelings of the Croat people and stirred hatred between the brotherly Serbian and Croat people. That's why they forbid that anybody talks about these crimes. And for instance, members of the propaganda department of the Communist Party in Karlovac had a small bulletin or newspaper that they published. And in this paper, somebody wrote about massacres of Serbs, and because of that, he and the other members of that propaganda division before the partisan court-martial. All of them were sentenced to death on the 13th and 14th July 1944 and executed just because they wrote about Jasenovac. An important role in spreading and strengthening Ustaša organization in Croatia was played by collaboration of Roman Catholic Church, in particular the Catholic Action, so-called Catholic Action, and its organizations like Crusaders. And we know that the Archbishop of Zagreb, the criminal Alojzije Stepinac, issued a circular on the 28th of April 1941 welcoming the establishment of the independent state of Croatia, in which he said that he is writing that not only as the son of the Croat people, but even more as the representative of the Holy Roman Catholic Church. He said that Croatia must be a pure Croat living space. Serbs and Jews must be exterminated because they are the greatest enemies of the Croat people, for whom there is no room in Croatia. And so, according to the American sources, more than 1,400 Roman Catholic priests and nuns personally used to kill, slaughter, poison, torture, rape, and forcefully convert into Catholicism Serbs, Jews, and Roma. Dr. Milan Bulajic, the late coordinator of the International Commission for the Truth on Jasenovac, collected 1,171 names of Roman Catholic priests who were personally murderers. The Americans have a largest number. It is not possible to give here names of all those criminal priests who were murderers, but I shall mention only some of them just to see their titles. For instance, Reverend Dragutin Kukolj, Reverend Nikola Mašić, Reverend Josip Bujanović Popjole, Reverend Mihovil Marber, Reverend Stjepan Gabrić, Reverend Krsto Jelinić, Reverend Ljubo Magaš, Reverend Vladimir Stuparić, Reverend Josip Banić, Reverend Grga Starčević, and more than 1,100 other priests. Dr. Nikola Nikolić, Croatian physician and also an inmate of Jasenovac, in his book Jasenovac Camp, described many atrocities of a friar called Tomislav Filipović Majstorović, who, fully dressed as a priest, used to slaughter especially small children. He liked to drink the blood from the necks of little girls. Fra Dr. Srećko Perić, standing in front of the altar at his church, ordered, "Croats, go and slaughter all Serbs, but first of all, kill my own sister who is married to a Serb. When you finish killing, come back to the church and all your sins will be forgiven." On that 28th of August 1941, more than 5,000 people lost their lives. Fra Dr. Peter Berković, dressed as a priest, used to kill Serbs with a gun. In a letter that he sent to a Croatian government ministry, which was found after the Second World War, he described in detail crimes that he committed because he wished to get an order. The Italian newspaper Il Tempo published on the 1st of May 1941 that Fra Simić approached the Italian general of the Sicily division and told him that Croatian government appointed him to take over civilian administration. He said that his main policy would be to kill all Serbs as soon as possible. He also said that he received the same order from the Catholic Church in Rome. A large number of Roman Catholic priests were sexual perverts. These days we can read about such things in all the papers around the world. They enjoyed to strip women naked, to watch them, to torture them, to rape them, and then to kill them. Some used to rape and then to kill schoolgirls and even small girls. They raped women and forced them to watch rape of their daughters. It was recorded on the 4th of August 1941. Dan Lastovica describes the rape of girls while their mothers had to watch that. During his interrogation in the Court of Justice at the end of the war, Fra Jozo Borovac, a Franciscan, admitted that he had forced Mrs. Stojanka Bulat to hold her 13-year-old daughter Mileva while he raped her. Further on, he said that a school teacher, Mrs. Stana Arnaut, was raped by her Croatian schoolboys. Fra Jozo Felinović, in his personal diary, wrote the names of women who have been raped, dates when they have been raped, and names of Croats who have raped them. Dr. Dragoslav Stijaković writes that the bestial crimes against Serbs were committed by ordinary Croatian population, peasants, workmen, craftsmen, tradesmen, clerks, intellectuals, etc. And even their children aged 8 to 10 years used to commit crimes. In Gospić, the most severe were students of the teacher training college. It became customary to force girls to strip naked so that everyone could watch them. Croatian soldiers used to rape them at will. The girls were forced to work naked and serve soldiers. Even the girls 10 to 15 years old were raped. All the rapes occurred openly so that everyone could watch the rape. Boys were forced to rape their mothers. Parents were forced to watch rape of their daughters. They used to take virginity of girls of 13 and under. It is not possible to mention all the documents and recorded atrocities of the ordinary Croatian people and their priests, but the International Commission for the Truth of Jasenovac keeps them in its possession. Its duty is to research, to tell the truth, and to prevent the present-day generation of Croats to be under the influence of Roman Catholic policy of hatred of all who do not belong to their church. I must say that I am really very sorry that I had to say all this so far, and I must try to be a little bit more on the positive side. The International Commission for the Truth on Jasenovac insists on a new and systematic multidisciplinary investigation of the huge mass graves at Jasenovac and Donja Gradina using the most up-to-date methods. Most of the artifacts and documents kept at the Jasenovac Museum were destroyed by Croats during the last civil war. The new museum built by the Croatian government does not show anything about the murderers or the victims. It is a false representation of Croatian genocide against Serbs, Jews and Roma. All the traces of the concentration camp have been removed, and all the area of the camp is now a plain field. A museum should be built in Donja Gradina so that visitors can see how the camp looked like. Displays in the museum must illustrate the truth and draw attention to the suffering of Serbs, Jews and Roma. We must insist for the compensation to the victims and their families. It is well known that Croats robbed innocent victims of all their possessions, and that an enormous amount of gold coins, jewelry, golden teeth, etc. was sent to Vatican to pay for the escape of Croatian criminals into United States and Latin American countries. Most of that gold belonged to the Jewish and Roma population. Serbian part of the population was much poorer, and their contribution was much smaller, but still significant. It is our duty to inform general public in the world about Croatian atrocities and genocide. The 5th International Conference on Jasenovac, for the first time, passed a declaration on Croatian genocide against Serbs, Jews and Roma in the independent state of Croatia during the Second World War, and this declaration in 8 languages, including English, Russian, Hebrew and so on, has already been sent to all the countries in the world. And the well-known filmmaker and artist Mr. Spasoje Jovanovic is currently making a semi-documentary film on Jasenovac. He already managed to record testimonies of many victims which will be included in the film. Also, he really needs financial support to complete his film. A well-known architect from United States, Mr. Otto Urban, has just completed a construction plan for the church with a crypt for those skeletons which were exposed by the river Sava or the roots of the trees in the field. The International Commission for the Truth on Jasenovac would very much like to support the fund Dr. Milan Bulajic for the study of genocide in Belgrade, in Serbia, which desperately needs more money to finance its projects. Thank you very much for your attention.